there, newcomer. Would you like to hear a story? It's one of my favorites. One of my very first victims. You never forget your first, now do you?
James was a quiet kid, never usually quick to speak, nor to interact. He played on his own often, sometimes with our dog Fido. I don't really mind it, as long as my boy is safe and happy. That's all that matters to me. That was until one day. It was hot outside, so I had James playing in the backyard while I was making him some lunch. I was halfway through another one of his sandwiches when I thought I could hear James conversing with someone. I smiled to myself, wondering if James had finally grown brave enough to actually speak to one of the neighbor's kids. Honestly, it was great to hear him chatting more. I stepped outside, my curiosity slowly turning to confusion as I noticed how quiet it was. James sat on the porch, alone, playing with his toys. I waited a moment, believing maybe I had interrupted something. When nothing happened, I thought that maybe the other kid had gone back home. So I called James back in. "James, time to come inside, honey." I followed James as he rushed back in, taking note of how fidgety he seemed to be. As James plopped down in his seat, I noticed he was humming a melody. It was quiet. I couldn't entirely make out what it was, but I knew it sounded familiar. I set his plate of turkey sandwiches in front of him, saying, "A lot of energy today. Did you have fun out there?" James nodded vigorously as he bit into his sandwich. I tried to let him eat for a few moments, but my curiosity got the better of me. "So, James, who are you talking to out there?" I inquired. James looked up at me, scratching the back of his head before replying, "Oh, I was playing with my friend." "Oh? And who is this new friend?" I asked, pouring him a glass of milk. James watched me for a moment with almost a sheepish expression. I stared back at him expectantly, hands on my hips, head cocked as I pried further. "Well, do they have a name?" James looked at me with the same expression. My brow rose as a smirk slowly spread across my face. "Is it a girl?" I crept forward then, suddenly tickling James as I continued. "Does my son have a little crush?" James laughed, barely huffing out, No, it's not a girl." I pulled back, still smiling as I queried, "Oh, then who is he?" "His name's Laughing Jack," James responded. My expression became one of curiosity and bewilderment as I processed the answer. Laughing Jack, huh? What a strange name. I began questioning further, curiosity winning. "So, what does he look like?" "He's a clown. He's got long hair and a swirly cone nose and really long arms." He extended his own limbs to add emphasis. "He wears baggy pants and is covered in stripes. He's very giggly and loves to smile." I chuckled a little, realizing that my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I knew some kids his age had imaginary friends. It was normal, so I thought nothing of it, especially knowing how shy he can be. Probably just a phase. The rest of the day was uneventful, business as usual. I soon realized how late it was and took James to bed. Once he was tucked in and the door was shut, I called it a night. But my sleep was restless. My dream was strange. It was dark, save for the stars dotting the night sky. I stood within the confines of an amusement park, but it was all run down. I scanned around, seeing that all the rides, food stalls, and games, they appeared to be rusted and decayed. It was like the place had been empty for years. I rushed past the dull black and white structures, involuntary fear taking over. One game caught my attention as I ran past. Ring toss. Well, the prizes, to be more specific. An assortment of stuffed animals hung from the ceiling, each one just as bland and colorless as the rest of the park. Thick ropes squeezed tight around their necks. I continued my sprint, eventually stumbling within a large tent striped in black and white. Quickly, I was enveloped in shadow, the interior nearly pitch black. I stood there, attempting to glance around, but I couldn't make anything out. I jumped in surprise, startled as a tune began playing. It was faint. I didn't recognize it. Not at first. That's when I realized it was the same tune my son had hummed earlier that day. Over time, the melody had grown clearer and clearer. And the next thing I knew, my lips were moving on their own. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. I began to sing, my body swinging side to side. It was like I was in some kind of trance. The monkey thought was all in fun. The tune suddenly came to a halt. I stood, statue still, this burning sensation of eyes on me creeping along my body. The silence was dreadful. My skin felt almost invaded as I sat there in the dark, waiting. My eyes darted around as something broke the silence. I thought it was shuffling? It grew in volume, sounding more numerous with each passing second. I thought I could make out a few shapes surrounding me. They were short, maybe coming up to mid-thigh. They seemed to be getting closer, bobbing side to side rhythmically. I didn't like the motion. It felt wrong. And the dragging along concrete, it made it feel worse. I watched for a few more seconds, and just when I thought I could make out the shape, "Poop goes the weasel," a frantic, high-pitched voice exclaimed. My eyes slammed shut from the sharp pain as I was blinded by white light. When the pain had subsided, my eyes adjusting, I finally opened them to see a sight I wish I could unsee. I was surrounded by children. Dozens of them, maybe more. They limped closer. Each of them were disfigured, some more mangled than the last. Some of them let out barely audible, raspy breaths as they hobbled along. Muscle tissue exposed and pulsing in the cold night air. Some moved with limbs bent in wrong ways, bones jabbing through flesh, entrails trailing behind them. Some I'd rather not describe. They enveloped me, those closest using their tiny hands to drag me to the ground before clawing at whatever they could get a hold of. I let out an unholy wail of agony as I felt the burning and stabbing sensation of flesh being ripped away. The pain only intensified as I felt my individual organs violently yanked away from their resting places. As I lay there, twitching from shock, my eyes could barely focus as I heard laughter. No, obnoxious cackling shattering over me. Excited, thrill-fueled giggling that never ceased as it all faded to black. I awoke in a cold sweat, shooting up to a sitting position as my breathing came out in heavy gasps. I winced, my eyes shutting at the rays of sunlight that broke through. Morning had arrived. I instinctively turned away, noticing my son's toys positioned on my nightstand, facing me. I stared, blinking a few times before shaking my head. James must have put these here sometime before I woke. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. I got up, gathering all of his toys before exiting my room, heading to his. But when I opened his door, James was sound asleep. I didn't think much of it, just shrugged and put his toys back in his toy box. After that, I left, heading down to the kitchen to prepare his breakfast. 30 minutes later, I had exited the kitchen, plate in hand. James was already sitting at the table, rubbing his eyes. Made sense to me that he was tired. He was awake earlier than usual. As I set the plate down in front of him, I asked, "James, honey, did you put the toys in Mom's room this morning?" His eyes shot up at me, before slowly looking back down as he muttered, "Laughing Jack did it." I raised a brow, then, rolling my eyes, I replied, "Well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room." James nodded once before scarfing down his food. Whoa, slow down. You'll choke on your food," I began, causing him to freeze. I smiled then, trying to make sure I kept him at ease. "You'll have time to play." James blinked at me a moment, then swallowed his oversized bite, finally beginning to eat at a more acceptable pace. The second he finished, though, he practically leaped from his seat, rushing outdoors. I headed to the living room to relax, but I must have dozed off, because before I knew it, I had awoken muttering, "Shit!" I looked at the clock. A couple hours had passed, and I still hadn't checked on James. I shot from the couch, sprinting to the back door. Sliding the door open, I stepped out onto the back porch. Glancing around, I saw James's toys scattered about, but no sign of my son. No, I muttered. My eyes darted about every inch of the backyard as I called out, "James? James, honey, where are you?" I felt panic begin to rise as there was no reply. Where the hell had my son gone? That's when I heard it. Faint laughter. I spun on my heel, rushing through the gate into the front of the house. I let out a very heavy sigh of relief as I spotted James, sitting on the sidewalk. I ambled closer. "James, how many times have I told you to stay in the back?" I paused, brow furrowing. James's back was facing me, a quiet slurping or sucking emanating from him. "James, what are you eating?" Slowly, he turned his head, looking up at me silently. One hand clutched an assortment of hard candies, each of varying colors. Some of them were in his mouth. "James, spit that out!" I exclaimed, causing my son to instinctively spit out the sweets. I rushed forward, crouching in front of him and looking him over. "James, who gave you that candy?" I asked. His head bowed, eyes fixating on the sidewalk. "James, I'm serious. Tell Mom who gave you that candy," I demanded. Seconds ticked by before he finally muttered, "Laughing Jack gave it to me." My expression twisted, and I immediately let out a sound ranging between a sigh and a scoff. Again with this Laughing Jack. He's not real. I narrowed my eyes, jaw clenched. "James, where did you get the candy?" James stared up at me with pleading eyes. "Mom, Laughing Jack did give me the candy." I clamped my eyes shut, pinching the bridge of my nose and questioning everything about this. My son had never lied to me before, but what he was saying is just impossible. I took him inside, making him throw the candy away. But I took a hold of one piece. I examined it for a moment. Nothing seemed wrong about it. And looking over James, nothing seemed off about him so far either. I let out a sigh, throwing the last piece into the trash with the rest. I wondered if maybe I was overreacting. He could have gotten it from Tom and Linda from next door, possibly even Mr. Walker from down the street. Either way, I wasn't taking any chances. That night, I put James to bed early before calling it a night. This time, my dreams were okay. That was until I was startled awake by something crashing downstairs. I sprang out of bed, rushing down only to stop with a gasp as the kitchen came into view. The entire room was a mess. Shattered glass from plates and cups everywhere. But what horrified me the most was what hung at the center. Swinging back and forth slowly was our dog, Fido. The light fixture was tight around his neck. His stomach was sliced clean open. Hard candy bloating the open wound. Bits of it falling to the tile floor. What sickened me most was his face. Someone had taken what looked to be metal fishing hooks and jammed them into the positions, forcing his face into a crude frown. My shock was quickly broken as another loud crash echoed, this one from upstairs. A high-pitched scream followed after. Immediately, I snatched a knife from one of the drawers before rushing upstairs with the speed only a mother whose child was in danger could have. I burst through the door, flicking the light on. The bedroom, too, was trashed. All sorts of things like clothes being knocked about. Even my son's dresser was knocked over. Sitting huddled at the center of his bed was James, legs pulled in close. I scooped him up, immediately turning and darting out of the room, skipping steps as I phoned the police. The moment I exited the house, I rushed over to the neighbors. I figured it'd probably be safer there than being alone. Within moments, the cops arrived, one younger, the other a bit older. I explained everything that had just happened to them. Their expressions over time went from pure bafflement and confusion to one of concern as they listened. Soon, they carefully stepped inside. Only seconds had passed before I heard an older officer go, "Mother of God." Then, the younger officer rushed out of the building. He gagged and retched as he leaned against the outer wall. "This is so fucked. Fucked, man." Sometime after that, the older officer exited the home. He looked calmer, but no less disturbed. He turned and spoke. "Well, there don't seem to be any signs of a break-in. However, there is clear evidence of foul play. We're going to need to secure a perimeter." He cleared his throat before continuing, "You're likely gonna have to stay in a nearby hotel, at least until this is sorted." I did not argue. I packed up whatever I could, some clothing, James's toys, even a knife, making sure that it was hidden. I wasn't in the mood to take risks. We made it to the hotel pretty quickly, and I booked a room, getting ready to tuck James in for the night. James was scared, but I assured him that I'd protect him, that he would be fine. We were safe here. Before he had fully succumbed to sleep, I had gently kissed him on his forehead, whispering, "Good night, James. I love you." I sat there for hours. I could not. No, I would not sleep. Nothing would hurt my baby boy tonight. I awoke with a start, immediately shooting up to the sitting position, eyes drifting around. When had I fallen asleep? I didn't know, but I was awake now. I scanned my surroundings closely. Well, the best I could. It was pitch black, almost impossible to make anything out. I froze as a low, raspy wheezing began. I swiveled my head around, confused as to what the source was. My eyes still hadn't fully adjusted to the dark. I stood, wincing a little as I felt something wet and sticky beneath my feet. I looked down, the sensation causing me to have an expression of disgust. What was I stepping on? My attention was quickly yanked elsewhere as the light suddenly snapped to life. My eyes shut as I was blinded, soon adjusting. And when they did, when my eyes adjusted, I couldn't help but look, my jaw slack, at what lay before me. It was James. My James. Oh, my poor baby boy, pinned to the wall. His hands and feet nailed in place. There was a large gash going down his chest. Bits of bone and organs dangling out. And his face. Oh God, his face. His mouth was mangled. Where teeth once were now lay red and shredded gums. Bits of meat stringing down. His eyes were black voids, empty sockets weeping tears of deep crimson. That's when I heard it again. That quiet wheezing. And then I realized the source. My son. My precious little James was somehow still alive, struggling to breathe in such pain. My fist clenched tight around the handle of the knife, hand shaking. I then jolted as a sudden fit of laughter reverberated across the room. It was manic, anything but steady. I spun around, trying to spot the culprit. That's when I looked back to James to see a tall figure standing in front of him, shoulders bouncing as the cackling crackled through my skull. It was a clown? Its face was a ghostly white, the material appearing almost like rubber. The black makeup he wore looked somehow pristine as he cocked his head to the side, matted black hair falling to the side as his mouth twisted into a sadistic grin, revealing 2 rows of razor-sharp teeth. His body seemed to shiver with uncontained excitement as the patchy outfit he wore clinged to his thin frame. My bottom lip trembled as I noticed flakes of red spots lining the black and white arms and socks, confirming my suspicion. This thing was the culprit. The clown leaned his head back, swirly cone nose pointed at the ceiling as his giggling began to rise. He clutched at his belly before swirling around one of his noodle arms, performing a dramatic bow. He lifted his head slightly, those dead eyes boring right into me from beneath a few thick strands of coal-black hair. He suddenly shot up, jumping in place as his fit of laughter continued. That's when I had suddenly lost it. I lunged at the clown, shouting, "Get the hell away from him!" I sliced down at him as I lurched forward. But quickly, my rage turned to surprise as he disappeared with a puff of smoke. Then horror as the blade sunk into my son's still beating heart. No. Oh, what have I done? What have I done? I muttered shakily. Please, no, not my boy. There was a knock at the door, but it was all white noise to me. I couldn't take my eyes off the remains of my son. I couldn't respond. I couldn't respond as somebody burst through the door. I couldn't respond as they dragged me out of the room. I could not respond as I felt the metal cuffing around my wrists. I didn't know how to respond at such a short trial. Insanity, they said, though some would disagree. I am now in the house of the criminally insane where I live. I've been here for months. It's not too bad. Some days can feel longer than others, especially when I think about that night. They constantly tell me not to think about it. And I try. I do. I really do. But it's hard. Especially when, on rare occasions, I can hear somebody playing Pop Goes the Weasel right outside my window.